Welcome to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. I am your host, Candace Dellacona, and I have a special guest for everyone today. My friend and fellow lawyer, Michele Katz, is joining us. We have Michelle on the podcast today, not so that we can talk shop about being lawyers, right, Michelle?
That's right.
Um,
Not today.
right, not today. We have an amazing story to share with all of you and to talk about Michelle's passion, which has resulted in the amazing Plus One Adoption Foundation. So, we're going to talk about all things adoption today and what Michelle and her team at Plus One Adoption Foundation is doing for people and families who are looking to grow their own family. So, thank you for being here, Michelle.
It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so excited. So let's get into it. For those of you who don't know Michelle, Michelle is a brilliant intellectual property attorney. We're in two separate parts of the country. Michelle is in Chicago. I'm here in New York City, as our listeners know. Michelle and I have crossed paths professionally. And aside from the fact that she's a brilliant attorney, she is incredibly passionate about the adoption world and the way in which adoption can really grow your family. So let's get into it and we'll talk about Plus One and your background. So we know you're a mom of four.
That's right. So I have two boys and two girls. It's like, where do we begin in this storyline? Because it was quite a journey to
Yeah.
get here.
Yeah.
As it is for so many families, it's how are we going to create our family for those that want children,
Right.
right? If I think back to when I first started thinking about adoption, I was in college. I was walking across a field with my then boyfriend, now husband. It seemed like out of the blue, I said, I want to adopt a child one day. Literally, I said that to him. And
Yeah.
he's cool. And he just kept walking. And I was like, all right. So I just put a pin in that. And then when we got married and eventually we wanted to start a family, we started fertility treatments. My husband is a cancer survivor. So that was part of our history. And I'm like, well, let's do both at the same time. And I kid you not, at 40 weeks, we got a call that our daughter was ready.
So you're about to have a baby.
Well, we weren't pregnant yet, okay? That did
Okay.
happen
Oh,
later.
40
That
weeks.
did happen later.
Got it.
But I tell people, like, if you're wanna increase your odds in whatever it is, right? We're goal-oriented women.
Yes.
Then I just ran things at the same time, and my adopted daughter came first, and I got that phone call at 40 weeks, basically gestational, and we 2 weeks later with the first 12 months for dummies, we hopped on a plane and we headed to Colombia.
Amazing.
Now she was an infant. She was only 4 months old.
Yeah.
She's now, just so you get perspective, she's now 19 and turning 20,
Yep.
and just this summer, she interned at the orphanage we adopted her from.
Oh my gosh. I
So she
love
got
that.
to go back. She got to get her file because at 18, it becomes accessible to you once if you have the wherewithal to try to figure out those steps. And we thought, you know what? It's easier. Go down there. It's college summer. Let's beef up that resume, work on your Spanish. And really, for so many reasons, it was such a great idea for her to go down there. We've got very good friends that she stayed with, and she did a month-long internship there. And of course, now we're at the end of the summer. She's back at school. And right before she left, I did a 30-minute interview with her, which I'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Will get posted in the Plus One Adoption Foundation
So
site.
that's how your journey began as
That's what all began.
yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
all began. Then we have a blended family. I ended up carrying 2 boys after that, and we joked, like, we wanted another girl. We clearly don't make girls, so let's go back to Colombia. All right? So that's, of course, we're fast forwarding many, many years. We did go back to Colombia. Just imagine it's December of 2019. We have no idea what's ahead of us as far as COVID and all the things. And we'd already done the baby bag, the bottles, the diaper. We'd already done all that. And we thought, okay, let's adopt an older child. And we adopted a little girl. Well, not so little, 8 years old.
Yeah.
And that was a totally different experience. This is where the seeds were planted for the Plus One Adoption Foundation. So it's a very different experience when you adopt an older child. you in our case anyway, we spent more time at the orphanage, and it was a different orphanage than where our eldest was adopted from. So we'd already done the paperwork, all that, but you end up spending more time there, okay? She being 8 years old, we were working on certain language barrier
Right.
acclimation, things
Right.
like that. It's a little bit different, as you can imagine, if you were an 8-year-old girl and you're meeting these people for the first time. But I will tell you, then when we met her, she ran and jumped into our arms. We
Oh,
were able to do, like, a call before, like, a Zoom type call beforehand, and we sent her a book of pictures of the family that you can make online, and we
sure.
sent that down, and
Yeah.
so she was able to get to know us a little bit,
Yeah.
just to give people a little bit of insight
Yeah, yeah.
into how that works, at least for in our situation,
Right.
and then we were in country working on the rest of the paperwork and court, getting everything official. Everything's quite official there in Colombia, and so
And what's the time frame for that, Michelle? So you arrive in Colombia, and how long
uh-huh.
were you in country?
Only 2 weeks. So,
Oh,
I like
wow.
that's not very long, okay?
No.
And so we got home December 31st of 2019, and she'd never seen snow before. She'd never been on a plane before. When we left the orphanage just to get to the hotel we were staying at, she asked, "Are we in Chicago?" I'm like, "No, honey," and we showed her the map and everything, and it's just so hard to understand as a child sheltered, like, really hadn't had that kind of exposure to anything
Sure.
international, and contrast that to our first adoption where there was a strike. We speak Spanish in the house, but at that time with our first adoption, my Spanish I was new. I was definitely newer, much newer to Spanish, and I knew the word huelga. Like, who knows the word strike in a form, in a form
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that word I knew the first
yeah.
time around because there was a strike and I was there for 9 weeks
Wow,
with
okay.
a baby, and that's a whole 'nother podcast. But all that is to say is I do think the universe evened itself out with this 2-week in and out, okay, and we made it home before New Year's, and it was snowing. So if you can imagine, we pull up in the taxi to the house, and as we're walking up the stairs to get to the front door, she's grazing her little fingers along the
Mm,
stairs to touch the snow, and then went in, and then we showed her to her room, like
amazing.
her room.
Yeah.
I don't know if she had ever had her room before. She was sharing with my eldest, the 2 girls were in the same room together, but we that was also intentional, so she didn't feel alone.
Yeah. What a beautiful picture that that sort of an image that conjures for
Mhm.
me and probably for all those listening. And you've made this very intentional decision to have adoption for you be a choice as opposed to the quote last option. And I know that that was the origination of plus one adoption and the foundation so that you could flip the switch and really change up the dialogue about adoption. Can we talk a little bit about that piece and how your mission with the foundation is to provide the resources to the family? So let's talk about maybe how you founded the foundation and what you do for families now.
Absolutely. So it was because of that time spent in the orphanage that I was seeing other children that were available. Not everyone's available for adoption. Some are working out certain family dynamics, and but many are. And do people know that they're there? Is there a way we can streamline this so that these kids don't wait as long as they do?
Yeah.
And same with parents, prospective parents or parents who are trying to expand their families via adoption. Make it a choice. And so I'm seeing this. I'm seeing all these kids running around and doing like arts and crafts projects and playing games and all the things. And I thought there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way to ensure that the process can be faster and cheaper and to get these kids in forever homes. So we get home, she starts school, then it's shut down. Everything's shut down,
COVID, right?
right? COVID. So she was in school not that long, couple months, everything shuts down and she's back at home. She was a non-reader. She hadn't gone to school. She's 8 years old. She hadn't been to school. Not in the way that she needed to be on par with the other students.
Sure.
At first, she didn't speak English yet. Now it's a fight to get her to speak Spanish. I kid you not. But and we do. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. She's like, you understand me? And I'm speaking to her in Spanish and she's responding to me in English. But that aside, of course, back then, now 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, that was not the case, and so it was really tough, and I've got now 4 she's my 4th and final, so I've got 4 kids at home, my husband's a first responder type, and I'm running my law firm at Vitam IP, the intellectual property firm, my day job, from home, and every 15 minutes, I gotta figure out what she's doing next.
Yeah.
But that being said, when the plate's full, you pull out the platter, right? This is survival guide,
So
right?
true. So
Which
true. How do we survive the sandwich
yeah, 'cause,
generation? This is how we add more to our plate.
exactly. And by the way, the grandmothers did appear on both of these Columbia trips. So we're talking about sandwich. So they were involved.
Mm.
So we had 3 generations involved in this. By the end of 2020, I had laid the foundation for the foundation, name, branding, all the things, launch plan, and then we launched in March of 2021. And the mission, exactly right, like you said, is to change the mindset. One, change the mindset around adoption. It's not a last resort, it's a choice,
Right.
a choice you make. And one of the ways to do that is to dispel fear. So there are a lot of misconceptions about adoption. Let's get real with it. You don't know what you're going to get no matter what. Okay. We put in as many parameters we can. And when we're trying to make these decisions, and I've had kids, it feels like, every which way, maybe not every which way, but more than one way. That is something we really focus on. And we even have a whole series on Instagram called Plus One Mythbusters that comes out basically every Tuesday on Instagram. So that was important to me. The other aspect was credible and vetted resources. How do we cut? There's too much on the internet.
Yes. Yes.
There's way too much. How do you know? Word of mouth. We trust friends. Can we create a network or a database, is another way to look at it, of resources that people can trust?
And
And that's what we've done.
right. And so let's talk about that a little. You've made the decision to expand your family, and the path that you're choosing, that you've decided to embark upon, is adoption. And I think, as the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide podcast, what we try to do is provide resources to people. And that is what your foundation is doing, where you're trying to level the playing field and make sure that the information that people are actually accessing is reliable and vetted. Let's say you're a person who's about to start your adoption journey. Where do they begin? I've just, this personally, I've had family members that have expanded their family through adoption, and great friends who have done the same. And it seems like the pool is so full and getting through the noise is so complicated. There are consultants, there are agencies, there are attorneys. So, can you talk about a little how a family could come to the foundation and try to help them figure out where to begin, and where do you begin?
Contact us. That's the first step.
Right.
You can DM us through social, you can email us through the website. So that's the first thing, but I'll tell you, once we're talking, it's me, another board member who's adopted, who's quite knowledgeable in the area as well. So what we do is the first question is, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
What are the pros of adoption is that to some extent you can decide. So some people are like, I want an infant. Okay. If that's what you want, then there's certain channels that are easier to get to reach the goal. Like we wouldn't necessarily recommend going international right now,
Oh, so
right?
that's great. So, knowing a little bit about what you're seeking helps you forge the right path.
Exactly. And budget. Let's not kid around. Just like anything, you want to know in advance what the cost might be.
Yeah.
And some would argue, like, international versus domestic at this point, they may be on par as far as expense, and others would say not necessarily. So there are some of the depends. But there's also a whole foster to adopt, which is very low cost in comparison to maybe hiring a private consultant and things like that. And there's a hybrid of things. You can do multiple things. So people work with an agency, they might also work with a consultant, and not all consultants and not all agencies are the same. Just like when you're hiring, if someone was hiring an IP lawyer, you gotta find the right match for you. It would be the same for consultants, for example, or agencies. And having a consultant, I think, is quite helpful to hold your hand through the process because we actually don't broker adoptions. We provide resources that you can rely on. That's what we do.
And that's really important because when you enter into the picture of the adoption journey, you're the guide holding the person's hands to help them find vetted professionals. And I assume that you also, unfortunately, know about agencies, lawyers, and consultants who maybe are not exactly on the up and up. Is that fair to say?
That is just as valuable knowing who not to go with
Yeah.
than who to go with.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I do talk to people and if they are frustrated, they've already been through the process, I would like to know who they are. We're not out there to badmouth, but we certainly want to know that we're not recommending anyone on the bad list. So far, so good. But it's true, and that is critical because our whole mission is to cut through it. There's so much out there. You got to cut through everything to get to the gem because people can spend years on research.
Yes.
And you don't want to wait years.
No.
No, and you don't wanna spend money unnecessarily. Who does? That would be ridiculous.
Absolutely, and I think from the perspective of starting a family, it's such an emotional process, and I think as with any decision that you're making that is so intertwined to emotion and love and wanting to expand your family, sometimes it's hard for people to see the forest through the trees.
Mhm. And we do tell people, we have a show that we put on via Instagram every month called The Bright Side Live. And we interview someone who can support in some way the adoption community. I'm the host, I'm the one asking the questions. It's basically this, but flipped. And it could be an adoptee, it could be an adoptive parent, it could be someone who's actually working in the industry.
Right.
It could all we had an energy healer on also to help parents and children,
Yeah.
who've been through potentially trauma. We had a micro movement specialist. Babies don't, especially adopted ones, maybe they didn't get enough belly time.
Right,
And so
right.
all of those things that we take for granted, they can stick with you your whole life. From infancy, you don't even know it, and
Yes.
you're stuck.
Yeah.
And so we've had all sorts of guests, and they can be found right on the grid of our Instagram, which is +1 adoption, and you'll know you're there if you see, like, a square with that one little missing piece, like a
Yeah.
Rubik's Cube, and then you're there, and just scroll, and most of them are half screens, and, we're actually paused for a moment on the Bright Side Lives. I don't know if you saw this because I know you follow us,
Yeah.
Candace, but Instagram has a rule that if you're not at 1,000, we were, like, at 800 something, then you can't do Instagram Lives anymore. So I hit start to interview the executive director at the Illinois Adoption Center, like, super helpful for the adoption community. And we pivoted and we did a Zoom and we were able to post that. But until we get 1,000, we actually won't be doing the live ones.
Well,
So
but I think with all that being said, I think starting the journey is so important and getting through the noise is important and finding that support and the vetted professionals. But you just brought up something that is very unique to the adoption foundation space, which is the post placement needs. And I
yes,
think that is something that is really hard for a lot of parents of adopted children to talk about openly because we all want to be parents, and particularly folks who could not perhaps birth their own children and they have been able to expand their family through adoption. And there are difficulties that arise as with any parental situation. And that's, I think, so important to get out there to take the stigma away. Because even if you birth children, we both know You as someone who has adopted children who are your children and your birth children,
Mhm.
our kids can have all sorts of issues, and I think that there is a stigma that exists that people don't wanna talk about the difficulties that you may have with those post-placement needs because we're still grateful just like we are otherwise. So, tell us about those support resources that you've been able to provide for those who have already had placement and they have needs.
And especially if you have multiple kids, it's also the relationship between siblings. You know,
Yes.
think about the fact that I had 3 and my youngest was the youngest for a while and then got displaced
Yeah,
from that position.
yeah.
So it's not just parent to child, but also between the siblings. I would also point out that it's not necessarily a need. We're shifting that to want
Mhm.
to adopt, right? Because we encourage there are a lot of children out there that need homes, actually. There are more of them, right? That there are fewer people adopting.
Families.
We need to increase the number of people adopting, and
Yeah,
they don't have to need, they just have to want.
right.
And when
Such a great point, Michelle. Thank you for correcting me on that. That just to clarify is that there are so many children that have their need to be with a family, and we wanted to flip the script and talk about the want. And again, changing the dialogue from an option to a choice.
and when that child is placed with you, there might be some support from the agency for some time, maybe, but it may not be exactly what you need. Right? If they're coming to check that the home's okay and all that, that's not actually what you that's not what you need.
Right,
Okay?
right.
Attachment is really important. Kids that don't have the ability to attach, whether they're, like, genetically connected to their parents or not, have problems later in life. There's a lot of books on this and studies, and so you want to obviously make the best situation for your children, and so working on attachment, we actually worked on it. We worked with a TheraPlay expert who I actually interviewed as one of our Brightside Lives, and that was actually in person, and we were doing some of the activities in front of the camera, so people live recording, so people could see some of the activities. Some of it is as benign as just rubbing lotion on the child's hand, just like in a little circle right on the top of the hand,
Right.
and then doing the same in the reverse, right? So parent to child, child to parent. Other things were wrapping the child in a blanket. Maybe you have one parent or guardian on each, like on each side, and swing them like a hammock. That was some so they feel secure, right? And so there's all these things I never would have necessarily thought to do until I actually did TheraPlay, and it was great. And so, yes, even if it's tutoring and kids need to catch up, sometimes you need tutors that are better suited for if your child has, like mine, who struggled with math concepts and reading, you need extra help.
And I think what you bring up is important too, because it is a unique perspective. And perhaps the pediatrician is not going to bring these things up to you, that you have a different perspective. And one of the amazing things about your foundation is that it provides parents the reason for these things because maybe in their own orbit, they're the first to have grown their family by adoption and they don't know things like this. So they can see a behavior or a trait or a characteristic in their child and not put the dots together that it was derived from the adoption. So, can you talk about that too and how the foundation is so great at helping parents A connect the community and provide this insight that they wouldn't otherwise have?
I'm so glad you brought this up because one of our resources that there are pediatricians that focus on adoption. And I've even interviewed one, the adoption doc. She's great and she does telehealth visits, so you don't even have to necessarily be in the same city,
Yeah.
and she can help. And there are others like her. When we adopted the first time, we went to University of Chicago and there was a doctor there who focused on adoption. I It is it was extremely helpful for him to have that lens and helpful for us. Then, of course, he moved away. And then it turned out that our pediatrician, who we'd been working with, our daughter was older anyway at this point and could articulate and describe things as opposed to our infant daughter, the first one with our first adoption.
Right.
But having someone to talk to, just to even bounce it, to take a call who focuses on adoption, absolutely. So we even have resources in that category.
And that's amazing, right? Part of why I started this podcast, which, a lot of our listeners know, is to provide resources. And in providing those resources, we're creating a sense of community. And I think that when you go through something and not everyone to the left and right of you have gone through that, it can feel lonely and it can feel isolating. Creating the foundation in the way that you have, especially with your perspective, Michelle, and just to give you props, as a lawyer, we sometimes look at things maybe more logically and solving a problem, probably you more so than me because you're intellectual property and definitely more science minded than I am. But it's really this beautiful community that you've been able to create with the platform to provide the resources also. So, having this community surrounding you that will provide prospective parents with this really warm hug of resources and the feeling of not alone is just so remarkable. And that's the best thing that you've done with this foundation. So, I really applaud you on that.
Thank you, and it's a passion project. I don't This is not a paid position, and the board members also. We have a full board, we have quarterly meetings, it's a 501(c)(3), it's legit, and we're almost 4.5 years old or so now, and I feel like we're really making an impact. We even had on one of the mentioning the Bright Side Live again, we even had someone we helped who used one of our resources, ended up adopting an infant as they wanted to, and then she came on the show to talk about her experience. And so it was like a full circle moment, like we
Yeah.
did it, or we're doing it. It's not enough. I never feel like we're doing enough. And also just it's one thing we have a mission, we're trying to do what we want to do, but it's also very fulfilling for me to know that we are making an impact in this space, that we're moving the needle, which is very important. And we joke. So I have a private wine label. I don't know if we've ever actually even talked about this. Did we?
No, no.
I'm a sommelier also just for hobby, my husband too. But I really have always enjoyed wine, and what pairs better than wine and parenting? So I started my own private wine label. It's called Wine for Good, trademark registered, as well as the
Excellent.
copyright for the label of the bottle. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the bottles with me now to show you, but we're working on our next wine. It will be coming out and probably realistically, probably in another couple months. But if people want to keep an eye out for it, they can actually buy the bottles. A percentage goes to fund the foundation. So if you're buying gifts and that kind of thing, people do care about. I know I do. If I'm going to be buying gifts anyway, I might as well know that it's going to support a good cause.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so that's coming out. We have a small batch from last year. This one's a little bit bigger. And so we'll see how it goes. And all that is to say is cheers to Wine for Good and Plus One Adoption Foundation. And I appreciate anyone listening and
Yes.
for you for having me on to share the message on this.
Michelle, as a mom, as a partner, a spouse, the founder of this amazing nonprofit, a sommelier, you do it all. And thinking about being stuck in the middle and trying to prioritize, you've certainly provided a great example of someone who is making their way through and trying to make it easier for those who come after us, certainly in the adoption space. I really admire you so much. And for everyone out there listening, please go give Plus One Adoption Foundation a follow on Instagram, on Facebook. And if you're feeling charitable, I know Michelle would appreciate the donations and to buy a bottle of wine now that we know that she's a sommelier. And for all of those families out there who are thinking about making the choice to adopt, you have a guidebook with Plus One Adoption Foundation. You have the resources now, and we're so happy to share them. So thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. A new episode drops each month. And if you're enjoying it, please don't forget to leave me a 5-star review and share with your fellow Sandwich Generation members. For a complete listing of past podcast episodes, you can check out any podcast platform, or you can head to my website at www.sandwichgenerationlaw.com. Thanks for listening.